Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual competitive algebra seminar. Professor Gurjar from IIT Bombay will continue his lecture on Zariski-Lippmann conjecture. Professor Gurjar, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So before we begin, are there any questions on the first lecture or some comments? So if there are no questions, let me begin with the talk. So I want to indicate proofs of some of the results which I stated. The first result will be by Steenbrink and Van Straten and Flener, and how to use that result for Zariski-Lippmann conjecture. So there are two rather useful results about derivations which are I want to state, and people will find them useful in other contexts. So first lemma is due to Zariski. This lemma appeared in Zariski's paper on equisingularity part 1. So suppose you have a complete local ring R with residual field K, and delta is a K derivation of R such that delta xi is a unit for some xi, so for some I. Then R contains a subring R0 such that R is the power series ring over R0 generated by an analytically independent element Y, which is a non-unit. Delta restricted to R0 is 0, and delta is actually partial derivative with respect to Y. Take any power series in R0 Y, and then you can differentiate with respect to Y. That is our derivation. That is the very useful lemma of Zariski. So the crucial assumption here is that the maximal ideal is not mapped into itself by the derivation. Some element in the maximal ideal is mapped outside the maximal ideal. So then you can split the ring as a power series ring over a smaller ring. So if you know what this means geometrically, it just means that our variety spec R is really something one less dimensional cross A1 geometrically. So it's a thing is called a cylinder, but this is only at power series level. So you get R0 power series Y. So it's cylinder of zero height, you can say. So the importance of this lemma is that using this lemma, you can assume that delta maps the maximal ideal to itself, because R0 and on 0 there is no action of delta. Okay, so this is the kind of application of this Zariski's lemma. Now suppose delta is a derivation which maps the maximal ideal to itself. Then it's easy to check from the definition of blow-up of R with the center M. One knows the definition of blow-up. Then just use the definition of the blow-up. You can check that delta extends to the blow-up. It's very easy checking. Then after this, you have another very useful lemma called Seidenberg's lemma. So again, this is very in people working in derivation find this lemma very useful in many contexts. So it says that suppose you have a integral domain R, which is of the one of the types we have been discussing, and suppose delta is a derivation of der R over K. Then delta extends to the integral closure of R in its quotient field. So this is a nice lemma. So now we will go to the situation of Steenbrink and Van Straten. So suppose you have a ring R, which is homomorphic image of convergent power series ring now, modulo some prime ideal, and we will assume for simplicity that it has an isolated singularity, dimension R is more than 2, and the modulo of derivations is free. And our aim is to show that R is regular. Now since R has an isolated singularity, R cannot be of the form R0 power series Y, because the singular locus of a ring of the type R0 power series Y is at least one dimensional because of the cylinder. But our assumption is that R has isolated singularity. So this shows that every derivation of R maps the maximum ideal of R into itself. So in particular, it extends the blow up of R with maximum ideal M. Now we can take the normalization of the blow up. Then Seidenberg's lemma says that this derivation further extends to the normalization of the blow up of R. Let us call this normalized blow up as V. So now observe that since I have blown up the maximal ideal, already in the blow up, the extension of the maximal ideal has height 1, pure height 1. And so when I take further normalization, under normalization, heights of ideals are preserved. So the inverse image of the maximal ideal when you go to V is a purely codimension 1 subvariety. So a divisor which we can call as D. Then one can also show, you can just check easily that when you extend the derivation to this normalized blow of V, every derivation will be tangential to D at a general point. Of course, derivation makes sense at every even singular points, but the tangent directions are somewhat hard to define. But if you take a point on D, which is a smooth point for ambient variety V, then tangent directions make sense. And then one can check that our derivation is actually tangential to D at a general point, which just means that the derivation restricts to a derivation of the or the vector field of D. That is the geometric meaning, that every derivation when extended to V gives a vector field of D. Now we will use our assumption that derivation module of R is free. So choose a R basis, delta 1 up to delta R, where dimension of R is small r. Then because the module of derivations is free, you can take the dual basis of omega 1 R over K. Let's call them omega 1 up to omega R. So dual basis, of course, is defined only one restricted to smooth locus. So we restrict our derivation to the smooth locus and take the dual at every point, then all these duals will patch. So then we have the standard identity that omega wedge delta J, action of delta J on omega I, is delta Ij for all J, all Ij on the smooth locus of spec R, because this makes sense on the smooth locus only. So also observe that now we come to the Steenbrink Van Zarten result, that the omega i's are, remember, they are holomorphic one forms. So because of the isolated singularity, they all extend to V. So then on V now, we have the equation omega I wedge delta J is delta Ij identically, because it was identically delta Ij below on an open set. And so by our usual identity theorem for analytic function kind of argument, this equation is valid for all smooth points of V. In particular, if you take a general point P on D, this equation is valid. But now, as I already said, the derivation delta 1 up to delta R when extended to V, they are all tangential to D. So then it is easy to see, because D has dimension 1 less. So if you have R derivations which are all tangential to D, they cannot be independent at P, because independent means they will sort of span. Derivation is like a vector. So derivation being independent means they will span the whole vector space of V. But since they are all tangential to D at P, they are independent. They are not independent at P. But then it's easy to check that once they are not independent at P, the equation omega I wedge delta J identically equal to delta Ij does not hold. So this it's easy to check because they are dependent. And hence we get a contradiction to the fact that R was singular. Hence R is regular. So the main point was the extension of the holomorphic one forms to the resolution. Now I want to talk a little bit about Cramer's conjecture, which I mentioned last time. So let me recall. Cramer's conjecture is the following conjecture. So you take a normal hypersurface of the type K power series XYZ mod F. So we are assuming it is normal. Then I mentioned that there are three natural derivations or obvious derivations, minus Fy, Fx0, etc. So his conjecture is that one of these derivations is in a minimal basis of der R. So in some sense, although they are obvious derivations, they are rather important because one of them should at least occur in a minimal basis. So this was, almost, I think 35, 40 years ago, we conjectured, but the problem is still unsolved. So it is very desirable to prove or disprove it. This is partly because in that paper, Cramer proved that if his conjecture above is true, then the Zariski-Lippmann conjecture is true for that hypersurface R. So this was his observation. So I'll just mention that this implication that Cramer's conjecture is true implies Zariski-Lippmann for that ring R is a good exercise for students. It's worth attempting for those who are interested in derivations. So I want to discuss some related results to the Cramer's conjecture. So again, we start with a complete normal domain, which is a hypersurface of dimension 2. Then it was proved by Herzog and Kuehl that the minimum number of generators of der R, that is mu, that standard notation, is always even. So kind of surprising result that the minimum number is always even. It can't be 3, 5 like that. So, and this result depends in a way in the proof on another beautiful result due to Junzo Watanabe. So what is Junzo Watanabe's result? So he said it proved that, so let Q be an irreducible ideal, which is primary for the maximal ideal of Kxyz. So irreducible means this ideal is not intersection of two strictly bigger ideals. This is a notion which is important in commutative algebra. So then Watanabe proved that mu of Q is always odd. So this was, of course, Watanabe was the first to prove this. Later on, this result was subsumed in the work of Eisenberg and Buxbaum about codimension 2 irreducible ideas, generated by Pfaffians and all that. So that also implies this, but it was first discovered by Watanabe and proved by Watanabe. Now, if you try to study the derivation module of our ring R, you are naturally led to the following ideal. Namely, you take the ideal Q defined by f, fx, fy, colon, fz, this quotient ideal. If you just think about how the derivations are, the derivation means afx plus bfy plus cfz equal to 0 mod f. So then this ideal is quite natural to consider. Now, because our ring is assumed to be normal, one can show that this ideal is actually irreducible because f, fx, fy can be assumed to be a regular sequence, and then regular sequence that ideal modulo fz is an irreducible ideal which is primary for xyz. So this is some standard result about irreducible ideals. Then Watanabe's result says that mu of Q, that ideal Q I just defined, is odd. Now we combine this result of Herzog and Kuehl with Watanabe's result. Then in my paper with Vinay Wagh several years ago in Vinay's thesis, we proved that Cramer's conjecture is true if and only if for suitable xyz, I mean the xyz, the ideal, remember the ideal Q depends on x, y and z. I mean whether I take f, fx, y or fz or f, fx, fz or fy like that. So the what Vinay and I proved is that Cramer's conjecture is if and only if f is in the maximal ideal times q. So that means f is not in a minimal generating set of q. So this is, I think, in my opinion, a very, very tantalizing question, that some relation between f and its partial. This is what this question is saying, and Cramer's conjecture is equivalent to showing that f is not in a minimal basis of q. So I will recommend this problem to any young mathematician who is interested in derivations or partial derivatives. Generally, we come across partial derivatives only in analysis, but they arise here because of derivations and singular locus of f equals 0. So that is what I wanted to say about Cramer's conjecture. Now I want to say some generalities about the Jacobian ideal. So when the variety is not defined by just one element but any number of elements. So take again a normal analytic domain, complete local domain R, which is power series ring modulo a prime ideal, and such that dimension of R is small r. And take any generating set of P, F1 up to Fm. Then you can take the M cross N matrix given by the partials of dfxi mod dxj. So this matrix is called the Jacobian matrix of R. Now, of course, this matrix depends on the choice of generators f1 up to fm of p and the variables x1 up to xn. You can choose different variables to generate the power series ring. So this matrix depends on both these generators x and f. But if you take the ideal generated by all n minus r cross n minus r minus of this matrix, that ideal is independent of the generators of P or the variables xi. So that is the importance of this ideal, that whatever generators, suitable generators you may choose, or f's you may choose, this ideal will be same. So this ideal is called the Jacobian ideal. So in particular, if our prime ideal is the principal prime ideal generated by f, then this ideal J is simply the ideal generated by the partial derivatives. And perhaps those of you who know some topology, this ideal is important in defining Milnor number. If you have an isolated hypersurface singularity defined by f, then you take the power series ring modulo this ideal generated by only the partials, not f. Then this ring is zero dimensional. One can show that if f has isolated singularity, then power series ring modulo the Jacobian ideal is a zero dimensional ideal, and its dimension is called the Milnor number of that singularity. So that plays an important role in singularity theory from topology point of view. Now recall Hochster proposed a counterexample. I will not go back to that now. Of course, its counterexample we know now cannot exist because of Kellström's result, but still it is worth proving directly. Hochster's proposed counterexample cannot exist. It's worth proving directly, and again it shows the importance of the ideal J, because there also you have some two suitable 2 by 2 minors, and their equality implies the derivation module is free, and if suppose the ring is not regular, then you have a counterexample. So again, somehow the understanding of the Jacobian ideal is rather important. Now there is one more important situation where the Jacobian ideal occurs. So that is so-called Nash blowing up. This is the same famous John Nash, and he introduced this blowing up. So maybe you know that Nash, for any singularity, he considered the space of curves on that singularity passing through that point and their tangents, and then he calls the arc space, take all the arcs or germs of curves passing through that singularity. It is called as Nash's arc space, and he did some important work there, and he had some conjectures about that arc space. So he defined something called blowing up, Nash blowing up. So it is like this. So you take your R, we took that R defined by power series modulo ideal P, and then we defined the Jacobian ideal. Then you can blow up R with center J, that ideal, and normalize. So first blow up with center J, it may not be normal, so you normalize. So this is called a Nash blowing up of spec R. So many people have worked on Nash blowing up, and although we just defined assuming the R is local, etc., but since the ideal J is independent of the generators, you can show that if you take any quasi-projective variety whatsoever, then you write it as union of affine open sets. For each affine open set, you take the Jacobian ideal. So all the Jacobian ideals will patch together. So in the language of sheaf theory, you will get a coherent sheaf on that variety defined by the various Jacobian ideals on the affine open set. So J is quite a natural sheaf of ideals on any quasi-projective variety. And then there is a notion of blowing up a coherent sheaf of ideals on any variety. You can see it in Hirschhorn's book. So there is a unsolved problem, namely take any normal variety V and apply Nash blowing up finitely many times. Of course, you will have to normalize every time when you take Nash blowing up. So unsolved problem is that after finitely many such Nash blowing ups, the variety should become smooth. So this is a very, if it is true, if it is ever proved, I know it will be very nice result, because conceptually it is a very simple process. Nash blowing up is rather easy to write down how it. So you will have a very nice conceptual proof of resolution of singularity, but unfortunately so far it has been proved only when dimension of the variety is 2. And this was done by Hironaka and his student Mark Spivakowski. So again, I just wanted to introduce this to illustrate the importance of the Jacobian ideal J. Now I want to talk about my work with Indranil Biswas and Sagar Kolte. But since we use some global methods by Japanese mathematicians, I want to talk about some definitions of logarithmic quadratic dimension kappa bar. It's called kappa bar, which was introduced by Shigeru Itaka, a very senior algebraic geometer from Japan. So that was his invention, and he proved many basic results about kappa bar. So I want to just talk very briefly about his definition. So you start with a smooth irreducible quasi-projective surface. Of course, his definition works in any dimension, but our interest is only surfaces right now. So you start with any smooth irreducible quasi-projective surface. Quasi-projective just means a Zariski open subset of the projective surface. Now we can always embed S in S bar, where S bar is a smooth projective surface, such that the complement D, S bar minus S, is a simple normal crossing divisor, which is abbreviated as SNC divisor. What is the meaning of SNC? It just means that every irreducible component of D is smooth. Any two irreducible components meet transversally, and no three meet in a point. Of course, since we are talking about surfaces, D is just a curve. So any irreducible component is a smooth projective curve. Any two of those curves meet transversally, and no three curves pass through a common point. That is the definition of simple normal crossing. And this is necessary in order to define kappa bar. This is a basic assumption. And by Hironaka's general result about resolution of singularity, all this can be achieved. You can embed S in S bar, etc. This part of Hironaka's theorem. Of course, it's unfortunate that you have to use such a big theorem to define such an invariant. So then after we do all this, we take the linear system H naught of S bar n times K S bar plus D, where K S bar is the canonical divisor of S bar. So it is generally denoted by that n times K S bar plus D. And for every n, we try to see what is the dimension. So as n goes to infinity, how does the dimension behave? So then depending on the behavior of the dimension, we have various kappa bars. So suppose for all n bigger equals 1, this vector space H naught S bar n times K S bar plus D, which is always finite dimensional by general results about coherent sheaf. See, this is a actually invertible sheaf, coherent sheaf of rank 1, which is locally invertible. So all the H naughts are finite dimensional always because S bar is projective. And then suppose all these dimensions are 0 for n bigger equals 1, then we say that kappa bar of S, our original variety S, is minus infinity. So that is the first case where this invariant is defined. Next is suppose this H naught is non-zero for some n, but it is always a bounded function of n. So it never goes to infinity. As n goes to infinity, this function remains always bounded. Then you say that kappa bar of S is 0. Next case is when this dimension grows linearly. So ON is the standard notation from calculus. Suppose the dimension of n times Ks bar plus D grows linearly with n, then kappa bar of S is 1. And finally, if the dimension grows quadratically with n, so ON square, then kappa bar S is 2. So this is the definition due to Ithaka. And clearly this is an invariant of S. So at this point I will just say that even for people in commutative algebra, this is very useful to learn, because given any affine variety, smooth affine variety, you have these invariants associated to that variety, and knowing what is the invariant, this kappa bar for that variety, it puts lot of restriction on that variety. Without knowing all these things, you will be just thinking abstractly and maybe not go anywhere. But this invariant will tell you what this variety, what properties it can or it cannot have. So I recommend even commutative algebraists to learn the basic theory about kappa bar. So now the surfaces with kappa bar S equal to 2, these are called open surfaces of general type. So the reason they are called general type is because, in loosely speaking, they occur with probability 1 in the space of all smooth quasi-projective surfaces. If you take a random quasi-projective surface, its kappa bar is going to be 2. In that sense, the probability is 1. So of course, because most surfaces have kappa bar 2, you expect not too many results about them, because they are all surfaces. You can't prove a very general result for all surfaces. But still there are some important results due to Kawamata about kappa bar 2. And an analog of Bogomolov-Miyaoka-Yau type inequality, those of you who are familiar in the projective case, there is a very important inequality of Bogomolov-Miyaoka-Yau. And that was generalized by R. Kobayashi. This is a different Kobayashi from the differential geometer. So he used differential geometric methods to prove this Bogomolov-Miyaoka type inequality, which is very important for general type surface. In fact, for general type surfaces, one has only this inequality, which helps in many cases. I cannot go more into that. So now we come back to my results with Biswas and Kolte. So in that paper, we have considered only those surfaces where the smooth locus of V. So V is now assumed to be either affine or projective, but the smooth locus of V has kappa bar less than or equal to 1. These are called special type surfaces, and one hopes that for special type at least Zariski-Lippmann conjecture can be proved, because if you prove it without this assumption, then you have proved it always. See, there is no assumption, and if you can prove, that means you have proved Zariski-Lippmann conjecture, which is of course very desirable, but anyway, at this stage we cannot do it. So now I want to discuss what we did in that paper. So there are two possibilities: either V is affine or V is projective. So I will not talk about affine thing at all, because some of the ideas there are also occurring in the projective case. So I'll just assume that V is a normal projective surface over complex numbers such that the tangent bundle of V minus singular locus is trivial. So this is exactly analogous to assuming that derivation module is free. See, tangent bundle is always a bundle. So the bundle is analogous to a projective module, but derivation module is free is analogous to the tangent bundle being trivial. So this is our basic assumption. Now, because the surface is normal, it has only finitely many singular points, say P1 up to PR. So our first result was that R is at most 1. So under the assumption that derivation, the tangent bundle of V minus singular locus is trivial, there is at most one singular point, which is already something, because you want to prove there is no singular point at all. But we proved that, okay, there is possibly one singular point. So now we will assume that there is a unique singular point, because if there is no singular point, then the Zariski-Lippmann conjecture is true for such a V. So we assume now there is a singular point P, and then try to analyze V minus P. Now, given such a singular point, there is always a minimal resolution of singularities V tilde to V. So minimal resolution is always unique. So why is it minimal? You take the inverse image of P, so it's a divisor E. It's possibly reducible divisor, it may have many components, but E should not contain any exceptional curve of the first kind. So by definition, this is a curve, smooth projective curve, which is actually isomorphic to P1, and its self intersection is -1. So such a thing is called as exceptional curve of the first kind. So minimal resolution is 1, which such that E does not contain any such curve. And such a minimal resolution exists, and it is unique. This was first, I think, observation of Hironaka, but it's a rather easy result. So now we are assuming that the tangent bundle of V minus P is trivial. So canonical bundle of V minus P is also trivial, because canonical bundle is just second exterior of the dual of the tangent bundle, omega 1. Second K is just second exterior of omega 1, which is the dual of tangent bundle. So that is also trivial. So now we have assumed that V tilde is minimal. So when you analyze that condition on V minus P, K is trivial. So that means when you take the resolution, its canonical divisor is totally supported on the reducible components of E, which I have called E1 up to EL. And there is a negative sign there. This because minimality condition says that K V tilde is minus of summation mi ei, and the fact is that the intersection form on this curve E1 up to EL is negative definite, because we have resolved a singularity. So a general result due to Duval says that the intersection form on the irreducible components of the exceptional divisor is negative definite. From that, it's easy to deduce that either all mi are 0 or all mi are positive. So this is something rather easy to prove, assuming resolution is minimal and the intersection form is negative definite. So consider the case where all the mi are 0. Then it's easy to check that means K of V tilde is actually 0, because all mi is 0, and not only that point P which we have resolved is actually rational double point. This is again something rather easy from the theory of rational singularities. But for rational double points are always locally hypersurfaces, and our assumption was the tangent model of that local ring of that rational double point is trivial. That was our assumption coming from the tangent model of V minus P being trivial. And since the Zariski-Lippmann conjecture is true for hypersurfaces, as I indicated last time, the point P is actually a smooth point, which is what we wanted. So this is the simple case where all the mi's are 0. So let us go to the case where all mi are positive. Now we want to, so far I have not used kappa bar, but now in order to calculate kappa bar, if you remember, we have to embed V minus singular V into a smooth projective surface, and that the complement is simple normal crossing divisor. But our divisor E, which came from just resolution, may not be a simple normal crossing divisor. That is some drawback about the minimal resolution. And there are easy examples to show that the minimal resolution need not be SNC. But that means we have to do something more to get a SNC divisor. So if E is not SNC, we can further blow up V tilde on points of E in a unique minimal way. So because E is not SNC, let's analyze the meaning of not SNC. It means either one of the irreducible components of E is not smooth, or two irreducible components meet tangentially somewhere, or three irreducible components pass through a point, some point. So this is the not SNC condition. So there is a unique way to resolve this situation by blowing up E in a minimal way. You don't want to blow up unnecessarily. So after doing that, you will get another resolution of singularity called V dash. So you have a map from V dash to V tilde. Now the inverse image of E on V dash is SNC. So that is how. Now you instead of V tilde, we work with V dash, and then you take the canonical divisor of V dash. Again, it is of the type minus summation Mj dash Ej dash, where Ej dash are the new irreducible component of the exceptional divisor. And as we observed earlier, we can assume that all the Mj dash are positive now. Okay, so that means that if you take Kv dash, every coefficient either -1 or less, because all Mj's are positive. And then when you add Kv dash plus E, if you remember, to calculate kappa bar, we have to take n times Kv dash, Kv plus D, if you remember the definition of kappa bar. So here we have to add E dash. But when you add E dash, because all the coefficients are at most -1, you are going to get something less than or equal to 0. So which is really nice, that means we are in a very good situation. That H naught of those vector spaces, line bundles, invertible sheaves, are very easy to calculate when this is less than or equal to 0. So there are two cases again. Suppose this sum is 0, Kv dash plus E dash is 0. So that is precisely the case where kappa bar of V minus singular locus is 0. If you go back to the definition, you can check that this condition will imply this. Now, in this case, we actually proved that V is actually smooth. So assuming kappa bar is 0, V is actually smooth. But the proof is somewhat long, because we have to use Takao-Fujita's some very basic results about surfaces with kappa bar 0. I cannot go into that because it's a bit technical to state all the results. So that is how we deal with the case kappa bar equal to 0. Now we deal with the case. Remember, I think I mentioned already that we have seen that kappa bar of this is because of this condition, kappa bar of V minus singular is at most 0, because either there are no sections of that H naught, or it's the sections dimension is bounded. So we don't have to worry about the other cases where kappa bar is 1 or 2. We are very fortunate because of the condition of tangent bundle being trivial. So now we consider the case where kappa bar of V minus singular locus is minus infinity. That's the only remaining case, which means that H naught of n times K plus D is always 0. That vector space is always 0. That is the case we have. Now in this case, we are assuming that V has a unique singular point, and this kappa bar is minus infinity. Then we have another fundamental result which was proved by Fujita, Miyanishi, Sugie. By the way, this result was crucial for solving the cancellation theorem for C2. It was proved first by Fujita, Miyanishi, and Sugie. that cancellation theorem for C2 is true, and this step that kappa bar is minus infinity implies V minus P has an A1 fibration. So their result was generalized by Russell for slightly more general surfaces. That's why I've added the name of Peter Russell. So then V minus P has an A1 fibration. That means there is a morphism from V minus P to a smooth projective curve V, whose general fiber is A1. And one can show that when I take the closures of a general fiber of this map, it will always pass through P. That means when I try to extend this map to V, there is an indeterminacy. That is the meaning of map being not defined at P. That means the closures of fibers of this map V minus P to C inside V, they all pass through P. Now, because our map is an A1 fibration, one knows more or less everything you want to know about the singular fibers that can occur. I will not again go into the description of what kind of singular fibers can occur. But using that description of all possible singular fibers of an A1 fibration, we proved that the Zariski-Lippmann conjecture is true in almost all the cases that can occur. So again, almost all cases is a bit difficult to explain here. But for example, suppose the curve C has genus at least 2. Then we have proved that Zariski-Lippmann conjecture is true in that case. Suppose the curve C is elliptic curve and at least one of the fibers is so-called multiple fiber. It occurs with some multiplicity. Then again we have proved. If the curve is projective and there are at least 5 multiple fibers of F, then again we have proved. And there are some more cases like this which are slightly technical to describe. So in that sense, we proved the Zariski-Lippmann conjecture for almost all cases, but there are few cases still remaining. So here is a problem for the younger people to finish, because tackling the remaining cases will both give you insight into the theory of open algebraic surfaces as well as tangent bundle and geometry of such surfaces. So it's a very nice meeting ground for several kinds of ideas. So I recommend to younger people to learn this theory and try to settle what we could not settle earlier. So I thank you now for your attention, and these are the papers which I had already shown last time.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Gurjar. We will take questions.
Sir,
No. Yes.
can you sir, can you explain this Cramer's conjecture? What exactly?
Yeah, Cramer's conjecture was, if remember in the first lecture.
Yes.
It was. Let me just. No, sorry.
Go down. Please. Please again. No, go down.
Down will give. One second. Yeah. The Cramer's conjecture was you take a normal two-dimensional hypersurface. Then there are some three natural derivations which I introduced. I wrote every derivation as a triple ABC. That AFX plus BFY plus CFZ is 0 in the ring. And then I wrote such a derivation as ABC. Then you can just write down easily 3 derivations which I have here.
So the question is, what do we mean by this minimal basis of der K of R? Because derivation
is in a minimal basis means you can given one of them, and then you can add few more derivations. to get a minimal generating set of derivation module. The number of elements in a minimal base is always unique. So we can take one of them, one
But
of these. Yes.
dir K of R need not be free.
No. So, but minimal number of generators makes sense for any finitely generated module.
Basis is just the number of generators.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So at least one of them should be in a minimal basis. So in some sense, these derivations are important because they are not in the maximal ideal times the derivation module. So that is basically the meaning of the conjecture.
See, can we say this dir K of R being
Yes.
an R module? It's
Yes.
an R module, right? And
Yes.
it's a local ring with a maximal ideal. So
Yeah.
the number of minimal generators that is well defined.
Yes.
So is it not okay? So what it says is that one of them must be in the base generating set.
Minimal generating set. In a minimal generating set, not
Minimal generating set.
by Nakayama, it just means that all of them cannot be into
Yes.
belong to maximal ideal times the derivation module. That is
Because that has rank 2.
Correct.
So okay, so that was confusing. That what is basis here?
Ah.
Okay, so is it not enough to see that m mod m square? This one of them are basis means one of them is non-zero, something
No.
that.
This is I think m mod m square is for minimum number of generators of the maximal ideal.
But
talking-
derivation modulo m, does that make
No.
sense?
That is, I think you are
Doesn't.
thinking of Zariski tangent space. you are
Okay.
confusing this with the Zariski tangent space. Derivation module is much more subtle than Zariski tangent space. The m mod m square is called Zariski tangent space.
It has something. It's a dual of omega, right?
It's real of omega 1. Yes.
Omega 1. So if we know the basis of omega 1 mod m,
No.
Modulo the
See, the
maximal
dual
ideal.
behaves in a very strange way. Even if you know something about omega 1, the dual is a very, it's very subtle. Dual can suddenly have less generators, more generators. Anything can happen. Just
and as
from
of now,
omega-
there is no candidate example or counter example.
No counter example. And I think it's
Candidate.
really important to settle this conjecture one way or other.
And sir, the first result on Zariski's, that first result lemma which you said about Zariski, isn't it that similar to this local important derivation, the slice construction, the proof?
Yes, exactly. Correct. Yes.
So it's a very good analog in the commutative rings. We have a result like this.
Yeah. See, this is for any derivation. Remember,
Any
there is this
derivation,
lemma.
yeah.
That one is you are thinking of the locally nilpotent derivation.
Yeah, of course, because once we have power series, we can go to the same, means we can extend it, right? Means it's
Yeah.
the same thing.
So that slice thing works. So that is more global result.
Yes.
Whenever you have locally nilpotent derivation,
Yes.
and yeah.
Sir, thank you. I hope you are well.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have actually one small comment. So the ideal Q which Professor Gurjar mentioned.
Yes.
So if you talk about the generators of that, so the minimal generators of that, then that plus one will give you the minimal generator for DARE. So
Yes.
there is no bound, no known bound on this ideal Q also, mu of Q. So that also can be a good example, especially from the computation point of view.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
so,
there is, we have used the result of Herzog and Kuhl, which says that
right.
derivation module can be generated by 2 times the multiplicity.
Right, that is that at most bound, yeah. But then the
bound.
multiplicity
So-
can be, yeah.
So I don't know from that whether one can deduce something for Q. Because Q plus one more element is derivation module.
Right.
Derivation module can be generated by 2 times E elements, where E is the multiplicity. From that, whether one can deduce something for Q, this I cannot offhand see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do we know anything about this Jacobian ideal, like its height, irreducibility, or anything?
No. I think,
Means it has
another,
something to do with the regularity because it's a n minus r cross n minus r. So, for instance, for n equal to 1, so
yes, but
it will tells you about the regularity of the ring. That if
but see,
something is known.
when you consider a general ring,
Mm-hmm.
the n minus r cross n minus r, there are too many of them.
Yeah,
So
there
the
are too many of.
matrix is m cross n,
Mm.
and we are taking only n minus r cross n minus r minus. So first of all, there are too many of them.
Yes.
But the so-called criterion of regularity is precisely saying that point on the variety is singular if and only it is the zero set of the Jacobian ideal. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
so Jacobian ideal really captures the singular locus, but Jacobian ideal is something quantitative. I mean, qualitatively it captures the singular locus, but knowing the ideal itself, which is highly non-reduced and so on, it gives a lot of more information about singularity, and one doesn't know. There are some results, I think. I think Lippmann proved some result about the Jacobian ideal, namely, if it has if it is at most one generated, then something happens. I forget exactly. Lippmann has proved some result about the Jacobian ideal in general. I can't remember offhand. It's an interesting result he proved, but not too many results that I am aware of.
Yeah, Gurjar, you mentioned the Nash blowing up.
Yes.
So that the Nash blowing up is you look at the Jacobian ideal and consider the Riesz algebra of the Jacobian ideal, take its
Correct.
normalization and look at its pros. That is the
Yeah.
Nash blowing up in one stage.
Yes.
And then keep doing this.
Yeah.
Then the conjecture says that ultimately you will resolve the singularity. All the singularities.
It's a question actually. Right now, to call it a conjecture, maybe it's very bold because
Yeah.
it's known only in dimension 2. So.
Right. So the first unknown case is you take three-dimensional isolated singularity.
Yes.
And then look at its maximal ideal.
Yeah.
And blow it up and normalize.
Yes. But that is the first step. I mean, you have to repeat
right.
this.
So in terms of Hilbert function, can we translate this into a problem which will say that the situation improves after you blow up? Can we, in terms of Hilbert coefficients?
Unfortunately, I don't know. This will be nice to know, but I'm ignorant about this.
Because one looks at the associated graded ring of the Jacobian ideal.
Yes.
And because the Jacobian ideal is primary for maximal ideal.
If it is isolated singularity, yes.
Right,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
So one can consider the Hilbert function of the associated graded ring.
Okay.
And then I want to understand what one needs to prove about the Hilbert function of associated graded ring, which will say something about the conjecture.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. For example, if one would like to prove that the multiplicities don't go up.
Right.
Something like that. It will be nice to prove, but I'm not algebraist like you, so.
But no, it's something which we can try to calculate
yes,
on computer.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, we can try it for even hypersurface in 4 variables. And just try there whether the multiplicity remains drop or at most equal to the original. Even that will be nice, I think.
So So question from Professor Watanabe, whether if we prove that the multiplicity drops, Will that be something new?
No.
That is, you
Sorry,
take a isolated singularity of a hypersurface, look at the Jacobian ideal, and consider the associated graded ring of the Jacobian ideal, or its integral closure, because Nash blowing up talks about the normalization also. Then calculate the multiplicity,
so
and if the multiplicity should drop as per the conjecture. And the multiplicity will involve mixed multiplicities of the Jacobian ideal and maximal ideal also.
Okay. Thank you very much for the nice lecture. But somehow today the sound is not good, so
I see.
I cannot hear. So almost so there is some strange noise.
Hear you very clearly. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, any other questions? Okay, so let us all thank Professor Gurjar once again for his very interesting talk, combining many things from geometry and algebra and giving us some nice problems to think about. So good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.